Welcome back to my vlog where we talk about raising your issue in the legislative and policy process. So in my last video, I spoke about the separation of powers and the checks and balances created in that system. I also mentioned that the previous apartheid government was where power was centralized, and when we moved from that system of governments, we moved to a system where power was separated amongst the legislative, executive and the judiciary. And this was done so that accountability could be done easily between the three arms of government. And hence we have what we call the system of checks and balances in the separation of powers. So power is further dispersed amongst the national and provincial and local sphere of government. So government has the responsibility of making sure that citizens are acting in terms of the law, as well as ensuring that there's service delivery. So how this happens is the Constitution sets out, so that is not the end of it. Power is further dispersed amongst the national, provincial and local governments. So government has the responsibility of making sure that citizens act according to the law and ensuring that service delivery takes place. So how they do that is the Constitution separates the governance into national, provincial and local. And as you can see, we have the parliament where we elect our politicians, and their job is to make laws and to hold the executive accountable. The executive consists of, it's headed by the president, and it's made up of ministers and cabinet ministers as well as government departments. So their role is to implement the laws that Parliament makes. And Parliament, again, as I said earlier, has oversight over the executive and government to ensure that they are spending the money as they are supposed to and implementing the laws. So this is then duplicated in the provincial and in the local sphere. So we would have premiers and MECs as well as municipal managers and HODs. So this is the spheres of government, and as you can see, the judiciary is not part of it, and it's deliberately so. So although judiciary is part of government, it is independent as it has to protect citizens free from any influence or pressurized from government. So if one were to look at this, it's quite a complicated process, and the question would be, so how does one as a public citizen participate in this process? And if there's a bill, what do we do? So it's very simple. When a bill is introduced into Parliament, it's tagged, and tagging is a process that sets out the process a bill has to follow in the legislative process. And it's made simple when the Constitution distinguishes between 4 categories of bills. So the first one we have is a Section 74. It's an ordinary bill, or it's a bill amending the Constitution. And then the Constitution would then list the process that the bill has to follow. Then we have Section 75, which is an ordinary bill not affecting provinces, and again it sets out the process that bill has to follow. And then we have an ordinary bill, Section 76. This bill affects provinces, and as you can see, it's quite a lengthy process that bill has to follow, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Then finally, we have Section 77. These are money bills. And these bills are introduced when the Minister of Finance introduces his budget speech. So as the Constitution also has schedules attached to it. So when lawmakers look at a bill, they'll look at the provisions and then decide, whether it's a Section 75 or 74 or 77. So the Constitution has schedules attached to it as well that makes that easier. So these are Schedule 4. And it lists the concurrent jurisdiction of provinces that national and provincial governments have. So the functional areas are listed there. As you can see, agriculture is one of them. And then in Schedule 5, so these are the functional areas that are listed. So just to illustrate, a couple of weeks ago, I blogged about the National Minimum Wage NCOP public hearings, and that blog was published in the Sunday Independent. But to explain is that the National Minimum Wage Bill is a Section 75. It actually introduces a national minimum wage of 20 Rand an hour. If I were to go back and see how can you impact this, so as I said, it's a Section 75 bill. So it means that the National Assembly has a final say as to what that bill looks like. So public hearings was held at the NA level. The bill was adopted with amendments, and it was sent to the NCOP. So because it's a 75, the NCOP can only make recommendations to that bill. So last week they adopted the bill without amendments to it or any recommendations, and the bill has now been sent to the President for assent. If they wanted to make recommendations would have gone to the NA committee, and they would then have looked at it, but it's up to them to decide whether they wish to take it into account. I think a present bill that is before the Parliament right now is the National Land Transport Amendment Bill, also becoming known as the Uber Bill because it introduces a definition of e-hailing. But amongst that, it also provides for powers for provinces to conclude contracts on public services. So as a Section 76 bill, it means that both the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, they both have a final say as to what that bill looks like. So the bill was introduced last year in the NA, public hearings was held, it was adopted with amendments, and now it's with the National Council of Provinces. So what happens now? The NCOP will now alert the 9 legislatures that the bill is there and that they should make preparations for it. The 9 legislatures, so that is Western Cape, North West, Eastern Cape, all of them will now get this bill and have an opportunity to have public hearings on it and deliberations. Because it's a 76, it has a provincial mandate, and they get to decide as well what the bill looks like. But in addition to that, the 9 legislatures, when they have their public hearings and when they conduct deliberations on the bill, they will invite certain municipalities to participate in that process. So when they all decide, municipalities and the provinces, they voted on the bill. Western Cape, for example, says they're okay with the bill, and Orange Free State says no, they're not okay with the bill. They then go to the NCOP and vote on that bill. So if a majority of 5 provinces agree that they are happy with the bill, it will then go to the President for signature. However, if the majority of provinces say they're not happy with the bill and they make amendments to the bill, it will go back to the NA committee, and they will then have to look at those amendments. Because both houses have a final say on what the bill looks like, if there's disagreement between the two, between the NA and the NCOP, the Constitution makes provision for a mediation committee to be set up so that they can find a solution to agreeing on the bill. So that, in short, is the legislative process. For more information, you can log on to my website, or if you'd like to leave me a message, you can go to my website, which is www.salnajansenconsultancy.co.za.